Shiver me timbers! Arr, matey! Batten down the hatches! Land ahoy!
Welcome to Conspiracy Theories of the Carolinas. I'm Ron Ramsey along with Lee Burnette. And Lee, we've got a fascinating show today. Won't you tell us a little bit about what's coming up? And most importantly, it's about one of our artists or one of our people here in Lincolnton.
I'll do that. But first, I want to say you've got the really, really great, just a radio voice. I love that. Did that really? I wish I had that voice that you had. That is super cool. So
Thank you, my friend.
You've done radio before, hadn't you?
I've been doing radio 30 years.
30 years. All right. Well, yeah, you're right. So
see, I'm used to being heard, not seen.
Well, as you mentioned, yeah, we've got a really cool topic today. This actually is going to run for 2 episodes. The first, we're actually going to deal with a pirate from the New Orleans area, and who passed away in 1823, or did he? Because
that's the mystery or controversy.
That's correct. A lot of people say he actually moved to Lincolnton, North Carolina, and lived out the rest of his days and died at 96 years old. And we're here, right here. We're going to have the authors of a brand new book that tackle that topic, and that's going to be next week. But early on today, we're going to talk about the pirate from New Orleans.
All right. So there you have it. Today is part 1 of the show of a pirate that is or allegedly buried here in Lincolnton, the city of Lincolnton, North Carolina. And I would be remiss if I don't let everybody know we are coming at you from the Sound Factory Studios in downtown Lincolnton. So
that's right.
This guy is, if that's really him, is only a few blocks from here.
That's right. We've got some B-roll, some video that's going to show with this podcast of the grave of this gentleman, Lorenzo Ferrer was his name, in Lincolnton. But before we get to Lorenzo, we have to go way back.
Jacques.
That's right. To Jean Lafitte.
Okay.
The pirate.
Get the name correct here.
The pirate, his name is Jean Lafitte. And they're actually not sure when he was born. His birth story is just lost to time. They're not sure. I've heard Spain. I've heard France. I've heard actually America. So you're never really sure
about this
with these things. The earliest actual history on him was the fact that he and his brother were separated, and his brother had been sent to live with relatives because his mother was a widow. She was a widow and couldn't take care of her.
Okay, now his name was John Lafitte.
Jean Lafitte.
And the brother was Pierre.
Pierre, that's correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct. And so Pierre went to live with relatives because the widow could not take care of both children.
All right. And then our story picks up in talking about this man or this particular person who was alleged to be a pirate. He was a smuggler. And you had a good point about the definition of a pirate and the definition of a privateer.
That's right. Pirate or privateer.
He was famous for smuggling.
That's correct.
And a lot of people got wealthy in smuggling. And yes. It is said that he commanded over a couple hundred ships and several thousand men.
Very successful.
He had to be extremely successful.
He was so successful
and a leader.
Yeah, so successful that when it came time, and we'll get there to this point, but when it came time for the American battle with Britain at the Battle of New Orleans, they called him for help. And so, but how did they get there? So he and his brother, after many years of being separated, actually joined back up in New Orleans. Now, his brother Pierre had started a warehouse for these shipping.
And this was prior to the battle.
Yeah, prior to the battle. Mm-hmm. This is around 1809, 1810. So his brother Pierre had a warehouse where he was storing all these quote unquote shipments of these things that are not supposed to be shipped, all these smuggled things, smuggled items. So his brother, Jean, came in and started working with him. They became so successful, they actually moved to an island just off the coast. The island's name was Baratea. It's hard to.
So they had their own island.
They had their own island.
Have their own ports, I guess, for the ships,
yes.
I guess.
Yes, and actually the U.S. government said, hey, you can't really do that. So they cracked down on them and actually imprisoned Jean for quite a bit of time.
Do you know how long?
Just a few years.
Yeah,
a few years. And then it was a little later on, so they had him in prison. A little later on, they asked him for his help.
Well, one of the stories I was reading about was that the British came to him and asked him to join forces, and they offered him a large sum of money and a lot of benefits if he would go against the Americans.
Yeah, $15,000 in money then.
Okay.
So they offered him $15,000. It took him, he said, give me 2 weeks to think about it. And then
he went to the governor of
right.
Louisiana, I guess, and made the deal to change sides, and they gave him more money, and he wanted pardons.
That's correct.
So
he wanted
forgiveness here.
Forgiveness. So all the stuff he had done.
Yeah.
So if we fast forward to the War of 1812. So the War of 1812 has been going on. They are on their island, Baratea. Let me get that pronunciation correct. So they are on their island. 2 years the War of 1812 has been going on. So around 1814, it's time for the Battle of New Orleans to happen. Now, Andrew Jackson at the time said, you know what? We are really, really lacking, warships. We're lacking everything.
Gotcha.
And so he looked at the success that the Lafitte brothers were having and said, could we join forces with you guys and you come and help us out? And so that's what they did.
And they agreed to pay them, and they agreed to give them pardons. And they were, of course, successful in their battle. They
were successful. You know, if you look at that battle in itself is really interesting, that they were so outnumbered against the British. I believe it was 4,000 against 20,000.
Wow.
And the 4,000 won. They just due to the stealth they had, due to the training they had from people like Jean Lafitte.
That's interesting. You know, I've been to New Orleans several times, and last time was about 3 years ago, and that city is basically below sea level.
Right.
I don't know how it was back in those days exactly, but I remember walking down Bourbon Street and looking up and seeing a boat go by. And I said, I'm underwater here. But anyway, it's a beautiful area down there, but I could see, and of course you got the river there, so you got a lot of things there to overcome to get.
Well, see, and the river that was the main thing the British were after. When they came down during the Battle of New Orleans, they were trying to get control of the Mississippi River. Because think about what the Mississippi River does.
All the trade goes up and down the river.
Exactly.
All the way north. So I could see that in a lot of ways.
Right.
Well, there you have it. As part of the story is we're talking about a pirate. And he's been famous in these parts with his grave being at one of the little churches here.
Yep.
And I saw that grave a long time ago. I visited that church a couple times.
Sure.
They do a great Christmas program. We've occasionally have gone and enjoyed their services. And I saw the graveyard, that we heard the story of there's a pirate buried over there. So it's going to be interesting to get some more details about that. But, you know, it's real common for people like that to weave tales about where they've been because they're doing so many activities that could really get them in big, serious trouble.
Sure.
So it's in their best interest to have multiple stories out there of who they are, where they're at, and where they're going, and what they did and what they didn't do. Most of the stories I read said he was born in Spain now, but it's been alleged he was born various places.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be interesting as to how he acquired a couple hundred ships. Of course, you can start with one. That's how some of the Carnegie started. I think with one, not Carnegie, but some of the families in New York started out with one little boat going across the river and built a complete empire on that.
Yeah.
And so I guess he must have done the same thing in the smuggling business.
Well, the smuggling, he was very, very successful. And then after the battle down there of New Orleans, what happened was they became heroes after that. So they actually pardoned them. They were going to parties and they were having a great time. They were royalty down there, to use a term maybe I shouldn't use, but they were treated like kings.
Well, they were famous. If they hadn't joined the Battle of New Orleans, they may have been talking British.
Right. And so what happened was what happened was Jean missed his days of pirating.
Okay.
And so he began coordinating with he began spying and became a spy for the Spanish. And at that point, the U.S. government said, you can't do that. They actually kicked him out of New Orleans. So he went over to Galveston and set up shop over in Galveston. And
I saw he had some legacy in Texas.
Yes,
I guess that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, and that's when he really got into pirating big time.
Okay,
and he was playing everybody against each other, and he was spying on the Spanish for the new Spanish, and then double agent. He's done a lot of really cool stuff that ends up turning on him in the end.
Well, there's an interesting story. I don't want to take away from part two, but there is an interesting story. When he was here, he had a visitor that come to see him, and through an emissary, they actually brought this person to meet him. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Sure.
And it turned out to be one of the aides from Napoleon.
Right.
And the minute they saw each other, they went into a hissy fit with each other and talking in French and accusing each other of all kind of things. And
well, there is a rumor
accusing him of being a traitor. And
there is a rumor that he actually helped Napoleon escape from imprisonment.
Okay.
So isn't that cool?
That's interesting.
I mean, if he is
there, because there's some evidence of that. Now, there's also a sword that was found here that belonged to him in the Masonic Lodge, I believe.
Yep.
So we got a lot of history here on this guy.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Conspiracy Theories of the Carolinas. I'm Ron Ramsey, along with Lee Burnette, and we're trying to go under some of the original, I guess, history of the pirate here of Lincoln County. And we're trying to go back and establish his history. As Lee, as you can hear, it's difficult.
It is difficult.
Because there's so many different things written about him. And we're both wondering where they come up with these dates. And it's going to be interesting on part two. If you're a little bit intrigued by this, part two is going to answer a lot of those questions. Right.
And it's going to actually tackle what happens after February of 1823. So we have to talk about 1823 and a year or so prior to that. As I said, he was spying on one set of people for another set, and then turning around and spying on someone else for the other set. It's really convoluted, but what happens is they all start chasing him at the same time. So the Americans are after him, the Spanish are after him at the same time.
It's time to get out of town.
It's time to get out of town. And so he is chasing what he thinks is a Spanish ship, a Spanish merchant ship. Actually, and he sees it from behind. They're chasing it from behind. What it actually is a warship. And so it turns around and he sees all the guns on the front of it. And so battle ensues.
Oh, wow.
And it's said that he actually passed away during that skirmish in February of 1823. February 5th, I think, is the actual date. Now, did he fake his death, pick up, and move to Lincolnton, North Carolina?
Well, there's connection. One of the stories I read about this, he was befriended apparently by someone from Lincolnton. I didn't say that exactly, but it was the Henderson family down in New Orleans, and they had encouraged him to move to Lincolnton. It would be safe or whatever. So that is the connection I found as to why he came to Lincolnton.
Right.
And of course, if that was him, that's the controversy. We're not 100% sure, but it's alleged that was the famous pirate. He had money. He never worked here. He had chests that was seen by people, and they were full of gold. And he bought land, and like you said, he never worked.
Sure.
So that's an interesting way to have had a house and land and no visible means of support.
Right. Never held a job while he was here, not day one.
And then the amazing thing is, if it's him, he alleged to have lived to be 96 years old. And that time period, that was very odd.
That was very odd.
It was rare to see someone live that old.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an interesting story. Well, I'm Ron Ramsey, again with Lee Burnette, and you're watching the Conspiracy Theories of the Carolinas right here at the Sound Factory Studios in downtown Lincolnton. We'll be right back after this break.
I've had this problem.
Big problem.
I really, really need it.
A good wedding planner.
And I kept searching and searching.
There are so many choices.
It's really hard to find one that has all the things on my list. But I finally did it.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you.
If you are looking for one as well,
look no further.
Here's a really good one.
Just use mine.
Use mine.
I'm very satisfied.
Definitely recommend.
Problem gone.
Thank you.
Guitar Wishes, where dreams with strings come true. The area's largest guitar shop and NAMM Top 100 winner, Guitar Wishes of Lincolnton. We carry your favorite Gibson, Fender, Martin, Taylor, and Epiphone instruments. We're an authorized Music Man, Sterling, Vintage, and Yamaha dealer.
All right, welcome back to Conspiracy Theories of the Carolinas. I am Lee Burnette, and here we are with Ron. We're talking about Jean Lafitte.
The famous pirate buried in Lincolnton. We think.
We think. But there is actual proof, and the ladies that we're going to have on in a little while to talk about this, they have found actual proof that they tell a story where they were in a library and found this proof and actually started screaming in the library. They were told to be quiet. But they were so excited when they found this proof. It's going to be a very interesting interview. So that's
they'll be here in part 2, our next episode.
Yes,
they're coming in for an interview, and they're going to tell us about their book. They apparently traveled all over the United States.
They did.
Trying to track down some of these stories, some of these legends, some of the rumors, and they've dug up a lot of stuff.
Well, that was the thing. This was such a rumor, and as you were talking about earlier, everybody's heard the legend in this area. Everybody's heard the rumor that there was a pirate buried in Lincoln. Nobody knows for sure. And so what they wanted to do was come as close as they possibly could come to truth. And they wanted facts and facts only. So they went on the hunt, and it took them on quite an adventure, and they'll talk about that.
Well, see, there's a lot of lore out there. I know the first time I heard the story, I was told that the governor of North Carolina had also approved him coming here, because he would have had to have been a very famous person and probably well known in the elite society of the United States, particularly the government. They would have known who he was and what he did. Well, and he may have had the governor of Louisiana or New Orleans, they may have had to contact them and made sure that nothing was going to happen to him. Yeah,
well, Madison was president at the time, and Madison's actually the one who signed the pardon.
Wow.
That Andrew Jackson, who was head of the military at the time, actually requested. So, when you've got the president and then you've got Andrew Jackson, who all know you, and you take
that made Andrew Jackson, because he was almost destined to fail.
Yes.
With that, they had very little faith that he was really going to pull that off, and it was stunning that he did, and was given a lot of credit for it.
Yeah, if you think about how that could have gone differently, that's really a turning point in that war, the War of 1812.
I've read some of the stories about that, and some of the, back in those days, they'd set up lines of advancement, the military would, and the Americans devastated the British in those lines.
Yeah, just sharpshooting, everything. We just outmatched them.
Yeah.
And so, it's funny to think about how things could be different even today if that Battle of 1812.
Can you imagine, how much wealth he probably would have had access to at some point in time?
Well, that's another thing.
If it wasn't all stolen from him.
That's another thing. It's so funny, because when people talk about pirates, the people think about, the first thing they have to talk about is buried treasure, buried treasure, buried treasure.
Well,
And so what is the proof that he had any sort of buried treasure? You mentioned a chest.
Well, the one of the stories I read that he was here during the Civil War outbreak, and the Civil War was rumored that the troops were coming to this area, and we had some battles here, so that's very possible. And that he moved his treasure, some of his treasure chest, to the actual vaults at the courthouse here in Lincolnton. Now, that's almost hard to believe.
I tried to get in there. They said no.
They said no. But anyway, and so the story goes that he had help in the Reinhardts, I believe, was the ones that was instrumental in helping him move. And these were old, very heavy, rusty metal chests. And that he opened one of them and took out some coins and paid them for their help. Right. Thanking them for that on it. So
that's a fascinating
that may
story.
have been, well, when that happens, a small town, they must have been very confidential about that and then told about it later on.
Sure.
Or word would have got around. But he must have had a lot of power. I don't think anybody could just took their valuables and gone to the courthouse and put it in the vault.
Right.
So he had to have some connections here. And it may have been assisted by Madison or the governor, the local political leaders may have had an understanding that we take care of this man. If he needs something, we help him.
Right. It's very curious to think about, as I was talking about earlier, the ship that he was on at the very last moment that people actually saw, the pirate, Jean Lafitte. So they say that he passed away after that attack on that Spanish warship that he mistook for a merchant ship. The story about where he goes from there, if he did survive, how does he get from there to North Carolina? That's going to be something very interesting to hear if our guests have any information on. And how do you get back? Okay, do you have people who are ready with all of your stuff?
Now, you're talking about a man that had hundreds of ships, thousands of men, and he smuggled all the time. So I would think he would have devised some very devious way. He may have traveled as an old woman. You have no idea. He could have traveled, I'm sure, if he could handle all those ships and routes and things that they did, he could have figured out how to get to North Carolina unnoticed.
I'm trying to think how many people that he actually trusted. Now think about the fact that he is a quote-unquote
he used
pirate.
a different name in Lincolnton, or this. He did not use the same name.
I'm talking about to get to
he
Lincolnton.
would have to. Well, you don't know some of the people. The few people I ever met that's pretty famous about doing things like this never travel alone. They always have people with them. Right. Oftentimes they will pay people to be their guard or be their protector, be their watchman. He may have had people living close to him that people thought were ordinary people that were there to guard him.
And he may have known that his time was up with all of these different people, these sets of people chasing him. Maybe he had some, like when your wife's pregnant, you're expecting a baby, you've got that bag by the door ready to go.
Ready to go.
And so maybe he had some stuff ready to go.
He may have thought out an escape routes too at some point in time. I'm not sure how that story about the Hendersons come up. Maybe we'll have to ask the authors of the book about the Henderson, where the Henderson connection is, and how they were friends, and how they encouraged him to come here, and how they think he got here. They may have figured out how he got here.
Very possible. He may be related. I heard he was related to Tommy Smith in here. I'm not sure. Okay. That's a rumor. So we'll see if the ladies know anything about that as well. But if we go back to actually his home in Galveston, he burned it.
He burned it.
He burned it. He set it on fire himself. Now the remains of that home still stand there.
Really?
Yeah. And they say, of course, as with all of these places of this nature, they'll see his ghost walking around. Of course, this is supposed to be haunted.
Well, now, I did see one story that alleged that he is buried in Louisiana. Now, did you see that?
I did.
And it says you can't be buried in two places.
Right.
So either that's incorrect, or the person they buried there was not really who they thought it was.
Well, we are from this area, so we know this story.
And there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that he was the pirate. Just from the sword, they've proven that sword, he had a particular signature he did on the sword. And that signature is on the sword. So somebody got that sword somewhere.
Right.
And not to mention the stories about the coins and the gold and the typical things that a smuggler or a pirate would have.
Right. Well, I don't want to spoil the surprise that they have when our guests come on, but they have proof. They found actual proof in some documents that
the eureka moment.
Exactly. And so there is that proof. And a lot of stories, if you look on YouTube, a lot of stories that you may read online say that he perished in battle. But us being local to this area, the authors of the book being local to this area, we know the story. And, if you're in Kansas City, Kansas, you may not be able to put the two together.
Right.
But, it's kind of a neat little thing to have in our area that we know what's going on and the truth about it.
I'm looking very forward to talking to the authors of the book on Jean Lafitte.
Jean Lafitte.
And he's the famous pirate that is buried. Now, his name that he used here.
Yes.
Is
Lorenzo Ferrer. Yes.
Ferrer. And he had a lady that lived with him that was young and had a child.
Right.
They said the son, he died around 1875.
Yes.
Is what I understand.
That's correct.
And the child or the son disappeared about then and then came back to Lincolnton. It was written about in 1895. So he came back 20 years later.
Yes.
Or if he came back to dig up some treasure.
You never know. And that's something else that I've heard about this area forever, is that treasure's buried around here somewhere. And if anybody knows where that treasure is, let us know. Hit us up. If you've got a clue, hit us up down below.
Right?
Yeah, hit us up down below.
Well, if it's like most treasures, it's been long gone.
You never know. I saw a story where they had found his treasure. And, of course, I clicked on it.
Yeah.
They're not telling me anything. Absolutely not.
Well, if he had warehouses full of stuff in New Orleans, you can imagine what the two brothers. Now, did you find anything in your story? He really wasn't mentioned very much, the brother, Pierre. Whatever happened to Pierre?
Well, I know that he went to prison.
He went to prison.
And
in Louisiana?
In Louisiana, yes.
Okay.
He stayed in prison in Louisiana, and as Jean Lafitte decided to take control of the company, and he took control of all of the warehousing and their company, and he passed away. But I do believe he spent most of his life in prison.
In prison.
Yes.
Well, let's say that Jean Lafitte was very lucky.
He was,
and so he covered his tracks,
and he had that escape plan, which is probably the thing that brought him here. And so it's going to be very interesting to hear the story of leaving that boat that was attacked to get to here. And I'm excited to talk to him.
Might have been planned.
Might have.
Yeah. Well, I'm Ron Ramsey, and this is Lee Burnette, and you're listening to the Conspiracy Theories of the Carolinas here at the Sound Factory Studio. Now, this is part one of a two-part series. We're going to have the authors of a book that came out in March.
Yeah, just a few months ago.
A few months ago. And this book, the authors are going to be here. You want to tell everybody a little bit about it's a mother and daughter writing team.
Yeah, Dr. Ashley. Yes.
And they have traveled all over those areas looking for information, going to libraries, researching. I know a lot of times going to cemeteries. I know my wife. It's amazed me the amount of things that she can put together with ancestry, some of the history, and then going looking at graves and getting dates and so forth.
That's right.
Tracking. So I guess they had to be detectives that
they were
to be able to do that. And I want to hear about the moment that they finally put the two and two together.
Absolutely.
And it's unveiled the
Beth
pirate.
Yarborough and her daughter, Ashley, and they have written a book called Jean Lafitte Revealed. Jean Lafitte Revealed. And I can't wait to talk to them about it.
Well, if he actually pulled that off, if he made the transition from being a well-known pirateer, smuggler, and the Battle of New Orleans that gave Andrew Jackson the reputation that he had after that battle, that served him really well in his political life. if that is the pirate, which these ladies have proof of that, it's going to be very, very interesting to catch part 2.
Absolutely.
Now, I've heard this story many, many years, and Lincoln has a lot of historical things here.
Sure.
We have a lot of famous people here, and in history. So this is going to be a very interesting part.
Right.
So we welcome everyone to tune in at our next show, which will be part 2, right here on the Conspiracy Theories of the Carolinas, to learn more about the famous pirate that's buried just a few blocks from this studio, right here to Sound Factory Studios, right here above Guitar Wishes, one of the most famous guitar shops in the whole world. So we're right here. We'll be back next week. And Lee, the authors will be here with us for this interview. And we look forward to finding out a lot more and finding out the proof that the pirate buried over at the Episcopal Church here in Lincolnton is actually John Lafitte.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And everybody, we'll talk to you soon. Once again, I'm Lee Burnette, and this is Ron Ramsey. We are out.
Questions.